what is the fertilizer requirement? Is it too expensive to give fertilizer for these plants, or it's a basic fertilizer that takes year round year costs? So approximately, is it too expensive, or is it okay, or is can we do it organically? That's the second question also.
I think that's quite a big debate in any commercial aspect.
Yeah.
Is I think there's a wonderful notion to want to move to regen farming and more organic approach. I would say in South Africa the approach is still um, a chemical intervention approach. We use NPKs. It's not a very intensive fertilizer program. The demands are not very high.
Can we just, is it similar to avocados or much lesser to avocados?
I would say similar, if not a little less.
Little less. So, for example, typically in India, it would cost you around uh, 40,000 rupees per hectare, or 12,000 rupees per acre. So I think it's more or less the same as 10,000 to 12,000 rupees per acre. I think it's a minimal cost what a farmer can easily bear about it.
Yes.
And can you just give an outline, few words about pruning the plant, how it is done, when it is to be done? Pruning a plant, is it a big task or it's easy to learn?
It will be a big task when you start to that.
Okay.
Then it will become a challenge. Ideally, when starting pruning is at a young age. I'm referring to maybe a 2-year-old tree. That is a good start to select a lateral leader or a main leader. So how the ideal shape of a tree would look like is almost a Christmas tree shape, where you have a main leader going up and no other laterals competing with it. So you have one leader and a nice open canopy to encourage sunlight penetration and wind flow through it.
And I think the future videos definitely, I think we would come down with showing farmers how to start the pruning in detail.
Yeah, so I think initially you would refer to it as training, like Cornell said. You start early, you train the tree, you show it what shape you want it to be. But then your pruning is a job forevermore. After harvest, you're always going to be selecting a branch that you'll remove to allow that light penetration, and also to, like I mentioned, prevent the trees from becoming so tall that they become unmanageable in because you will see a massive decline in your quality if you are not maintaining the size and the density of your orchards.
Can you also tell a brief about the varieties in Macadamia? So we hear many numbers, few names. Uh, can you please give a brief intro about the number of varieties being popular here, and what is the percentage of farmers are planting them? A brief about a few varieties, please.
So the names of cultivars is usually referred to a number. As the first plantations were made in Hawaii, they allocated Hawaiian names to a lot of the cultivars, which most of the world struggle to pronounce. So they rather referred to the number of where the trial block was at and these positioned in the trial block. So you will get numbers like Beaumont being a 695. Beaumont being his name, 695 referring to the number.
Or 791 Fuji.
791.
791 would have been literally 791 in the trial, and the name Fuji is a Hawaiian name.
And the macadamia industry, I guess, has kept on with those traditions, having Australian opening in March.
Farmer harvests the nuts. Some cultivars, they drop the nuts. Beaumont does not drop, so we have to spray ethifon,
very
low dose of ethifon, just so that the whole nuts fall into the ground, and we just pick it up. So what happens after we pick the nuts, and what do we do? How do the next process happen?
I think the next process to be focused on is pruning, right?
Oh, so from harvest, your nut gets removed. So the kernel is in a hard shell, and then around the hard shell is a softer, what they call the husk. So most farms at a certain scale will have their own dehusking plant on site, like we do. I mean, we've got what, 40 hectares of macadamia.
What is the moisture levels what we get when we harvest the nuts?
It's about 15%.
15%
Or
nut,
if not a
it
bit
drops.
higher,
It
yes.
drops
And then
down.
dried down to about 5%.
5%.
Then gets sent to a much bigger facility, which is a cracking facility. There it is professionally dried down to about 1%. Then it's brittle enough for cracking.
Okay.
And then it'll be cracked. Obviously, it's a very hard shell, so it's very heavy machinery. But it's not a difficult concept to replicate, and it's something that in India you could develop. Dehusking, cracking facilities. Obviously, if you're exporting in shell, then you don't need a cracking facility. You can bypass that process and export it exactly as it is in its shell.
The nuts fall from the tree to the ground.
Yes.
Then they are collected.
Yes.
They're gotten to the processing center
Yes.
where the outer skin is dehusked.
Yes.
So that is where the moisture levels go from 15% to 5%.
After you've removed the husk, you then dry it in its shell.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from then we send it to a processing center for the secondary, breaking the another layer of the nut. So this where it is processed to kernel, from 5% it has got to 1%. And what is the then cracked? So what is the loss? For example, what is the yield per hectare per farmer? So what can we expect?
Yeah, so we talk about nuts and shell. So that's before it's cracked.
Okay.
Nuts and shell is, you're aiming for about 5 tons a hectare.
Nut and shell.
Yeah.
So
3 to 5 tons.
it will depend on the moisture content. So it's important to set a standard of how do we measure nut and shell. When it is brought down to 2%, 2 or 1%, like Lauren said, that is our standard weight of measurement. And that is when we say how much you actually yielded from the tree. Now that can differ from climate to climate, cultivar to cultivar. But in the industry, we are usually looking at 2.1 tons per hectare, can go all the way up to 3.5 tons, depending on the health of the tree.
So the reality is that we should never measure the production with the husk on.
Yes.
Husk has to be removed.
Yes.
It has to be dried, brought to 5%. That is when with nut with shell is measured as the production quantities per hectare.
That is 2% moisture.
That is, 2% moisture, and the shell on it is the right way we measure the production. So that's anywhere between 2.1 tons to 3.5 or even little more. So it's not realistic that we get 20, 30 tons a hectare. That's not realistic. So the unit of measurement in this industry is nut and a shell together.
Nut and shell, yes.
Yeah, we get a nut here into the dehusker. We got it dehusked, and we got a nut which is 5% or 2.5% or 1%. Then decrease to that. What is the ideal size of the nut? What the industry demands? What is the pricing for the farmer?
Depends on the cultivar. Different cultivars will naturally produce different sizes. So style 0 and style 1 are your biggest, and they'll get a premium, and then it's graded all the way down to style 4, and then even smaller, which would be more used in the ingredient or the baking markets.
So what is a minimum size where the pack houses or the processing centers don't buy the nuts?
It depends on the processor. Some processors they don't have a threshold. They're quite happy to process any size. Some processors, because the volumes increased, they actually had a threshold where they said they will, and it's more to do with quality rather than size, that they will have a cutoff, a threshold cutoff.
So quality means the cracking quality.
The quality of the kernel.
Okay, quality of the kernel.
What you are left with, yes. Okay. Does it have any imperfections on it? Is it a perfect round white nut? Has it broken? Is there anything on it that is not favorable? Any insect damage? And if it reaches a certain threshold, they may just say we can't accept that.
So in India, we have this cashew nut industry. I think it's also similar to that. So one joint good size cashews fetch more price rather than distorted, small.
Yes, absolutely. It's the same.
The same thing.
Yes.
Finally, I just wanted to ask a few more questions about, from the farmer's side, does these plants have any disease? Or it's what we generally know in India that macadamia plants are very hardy, they don't have any diseases. Is it so? Is it possible?
No, that is not the case.
Okay.
As we also said ahead of time, as we've explained previously, it's very important to establish a good foundation for plants, especially preventing diseases, preventing extreme stress conditions. So major diseases that macadamias are currently dealing with. In macadamias, we do deal with major diseases. These diseases will be Phytophthora pythium, which is a root rot disease. And then thirdly to that is going to be a branch dieback disease, which is a disease that is caused by extreme stress conditions to the macadamia. So these are three major diseases, and then there will be others as well, which is more concerned on the flowering side and on the macadamia side. But when it comes to the health of the tree, the three major diseases are those.
Do you have any pests for the plants?
Major pests in macadamias in the South African industry especially is going to be your stink bug, right? Yes, it's going to be a stink bug, which is your major pest in South Africa, followed by something like nut borer.
Thrips, aphids, you have any impact on this?
We do have thrips and aphids. Thrips is mainly targeting the new flush of the tree, which has a long-term negative impact, and then also targeting the flowers. When in flower, the thrips might damage the flower.
Thank you very much for us to give us all the information about macadamia, how the industry in South Africa is doing, and the quality plants, how you provide to your customers, and more information about the genetics. And thank you again from our viewers.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming to visit us in South Africa.